I arrived in Los Angeles with a single dream: to turn my life into something extraordinary. That evening, the moment I set foot on the Western Boulevard, I felt like a part of this incredible city. The dazzling lights, the neon glow of shop windows, the distant sound of music, and the frenetic rhythm felt mesmerizing. My friend Karina excitedly suggested we spend the evening at one of the city's most exclusive clubs, a place that's hard to get into without connections. As we entered, the air was immediately filled with the scent of expensive perfume, laughter, and the confident chatter of people who seemed to know their place. It felt as though the soft lighting, velvet couches, and gentle music reminded you that no one here was by chance. In the crowd, I noticed him, Liam. Tall, poised, he embodied success and style. A man with his life in order. Someone who never doubted himself. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit, a watch that sparkled with every movement of his hand, and his confident gaze drifted easily over the faces around him. His eyes paused on me, and I felt my heart skip a beat. It was as if he saw something essential in me, something he needed. Liam walked toward me with a slight, almost predatory smile. There was something so captivating in his gaze that I could hardly breathe. He introduced himself, and his voice sounded as if every word had been carefully chosen in advance. He asked me where I was from and what I did, and though his questions were simple, he listened intently, looking straight into my eyes. In his presence, I felt special, as if this wasn't an ordinary conversation, but an opportunity, a moment that might change my life. We stood by the bar when he casually suggested that I could accompany him to social events. I nearly laughed. The offer was so unexpected and paradoxical that it took me a moment to grasp its meaning. "You'd be my perfect girl," he said, with a slight, barely noticeable emphasis, as if he was negotiating a mutually beneficial deal. Liam spoke of privileges, of the luxury I could enjoy if I agreed to be by his side. His proposal didn't sound romantic. It was calculated, like a plan thought out to the smallest detail. He didn't hide the fact that he needed to create a certain image, and that I could become part of that image, adding the needed touch of glamour. My heart raced. Something about his offer intrigued me, yet it also made me wary. He spoke confidently, without a hint of doubt, as if he knew I would agree. Liam looked at me as if he was already assessing my decision, and this intense attention threw me off for a moment. Karina, noticing our conversation, shot me a worried glance, but I couldn't take my eyes off Liam. When he left, slipping me his card and quietly saying he wouldn't wait long, I stood in the dimly lit room, feeling as if I had just brushed against something dangerous. The next morning, I woke up feeling a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Liam and his proposal were vivid in my mind, almost as if he were right there. The previous evening felt like a dream, but the business card in my bag proved otherwise. I turned it over in my hands, examining its strict, minimalist design, as if it held the answer to the question that had kept me awake all night. What kind of person makes such an offer to a stranger? I paced around my room, deliberating, as though my decision held more weight than just parties and a new social circle. My friends' cautions and my own fears urged me to stay away, yet I couldn't shake the thought of what I might miss out on. This was a chance to see something I had only vaguely dreamed about before. After all, I had come to Los Angeles in search of a new life. But could I really allow myself to become the companion of someone who spoke to me like a business partner? Who saw in me nothing more than a role to play? Karina, noticing my state, just smirked. She always said that I lacked the courage to take risks. She rattled off examples of women who had entered high society through bold decisions, telling me that I overthink things, missing out on important moments. Karina knew I needed someone to help me open up to the world, and Liam might just be that person. But something inside me still resisted. I thought about how quickly he approached me and made his offer, as if he had known me for a long time. His calm gaze, the businesslike expression on his face, it all felt strange, and I couldn't understand what really mattered to him. Was I just a part of his image, or was there something more? In the end, I decided I wouldn't know unless I tried. I dialed the number on the card, my heart pounding. He answered immediately, as if he had been waiting for this call. Liam's voice sounded calm, almost indifferent, as he suggested meeting for dinner at one of the city's upscale restaurants. I felt a twinge of disappointment in his tone. There was no hint of excitement or curiosity, as though this was merely routine, part of his usual schedule. 9 o'clock, he said, without asking any extra questions, as if I had already agreed. When I hung up, I realized there was no turning back. Ahead of me was an evening that might change everything. The restaurant where Liam invited me was located on the rooftop of one of the city's most luxurious hotels. As I stepped inside, it felt like entering another world. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a panoramic view of nighttime Los Angeles. A city glowing like a necklace scattered over the hills. Every detail of the interior spoke of luxury and status, as though this place were meant exclusively for the chosen few. Liam was waiting for me at a table by the window. He immediately drew attention with his impeccable appearance. A sharp black suit that fit him perfectly, and an intense gaze that seemed to pierce right through you. He smiled, noticing my hesitation, and stood to help me with my chair. There was a certain detached chivalry in him, as if all his actions were calculated, every gesture practiced. I couldn't tell if I found this charming or off-putting. "I'm glad you came," he said, as if discussing a business meeting. His voice was calm, restrained, with no hint of warmth. He got straight to the point, beginning to outline what I could gain from this friendship. "You'll have the chance to go where most people can't. This isn't just about social events," he said, his gaze becoming more intense. "This is a society where connections are forged, deals are made, where the fates of people and businesses are decided." I listened, but his words sounded overly polished, as if he were reciting a script. He described his life as though reading from an investor brochure, and it threw me off balance. No matter the topic, his habits, his social circle, his plans, everything felt flawlessly crafted, without a single flaw or doubt. Beneath that shine, there was something elusive I couldn't quite understand. When the champagne arrived, he raised his glass and offered what seemed like an odd toast. "To the perfect partnership." He smiled, but I caught a glint of hardness in his eyes. He wanted everything to go according to his rules, for me to meet his expectations. To Liam, I was a part of his meticulously planned life, a piece of the mosaic that was meant to fit seamlessly into the bigger picture. During dinner, he made an unexpected offer. He proposed creating a new style for me, a whole wardrobe to match the image he envisioned by his side. And though there was an allure to it, I was still wary of how strongly he emphasized the idea of an ideal companion. "You'll accompany me to all important events, and I'll ensure your life is worthy of these occasions," he said, as if laying out the terms of a contract. I noticed that even now, looking at me, he seemed to be assessing how easily I could be shaped to his requirements. Yet, something about his manner was also appealing, instilling a confidence that he could indeed give me this luxurious life. I wondered what this new me would look like, the person he envisioned by his side. It was as if I had a chance to transform, to become someone he would proudly present to the world. And at that moment, I realized a spark of curiosity was igniting within me. Sitting across from Liam in this luxurious restaurant with a glass of expensive champagne, I felt something shift inside me, as if my world had split into a before and after. As we said goodbye at the entrance, Liam held my hand for a moment longer than necessary. He looked into my eyes with something impenetrable, something I couldn't quite grasp. He reminded me that he expected my answer by morning and left, leaving me alone with thoughts that refused to let me go. The night passed in sleeplessness. I tossed and turned in bed, staring at the ceiling, with thoughts of Liam filling every minute. He seemed so flawless, so in control of everything around him, yet that very control made me uneasy. His offer opened a door to another world, a world I had dreamed of but only knew through hearsay and glossy magazine articles. Everything seemed enticing, Parties, luxurious outfits, an environment where I could lose myself, leave all my past worries behind. But something inside me resisted. Why should I conform to someone else's idea of the perfect life? Why was his perfect girl not me, but a version he had crafted? The thought that my value to him lay only in my ability to meet his standards was disheartening. But along with this, there was something else, an allure, like the sweet taste of forbidden fruit. Karina came by in the morning. Her eyes lit up as soon as she heard about my doubts. She didn't hide her excitement and confidence that, in my place, she would agree without hesitation. We sat in the kitchen, and Karina told me that such chances were rare, that I could become part of something big if I would just take a risk. She was sure that Liam's intentions were serious, and she saw in his offer not a trap, but a new stage in my life. To her, this was an adventure worth trying, if only so I wouldn't regret what I hadn't done. "You've always wanted more," she said, and her words felt all too familiar. Maybe she was right, and I was simply afraid of change. Perhaps I was underestimating my own potential. All these years I had been living cautiously, taking small steps, afraid to veer off course, afraid to stumble. But now I was faced with a choice that could split my life into a before and after. When I finally made my decision, the sun was already high above the horizon, its rays filtering through the curtains as if urging me on. I picked up the phone, my heart racing, and dialed Liam. He answered almost immediately, as though he had been waiting for my call. "I agree," I said, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. "Excellent," he replied calmly with a tone of satisfied confidence. "I'll send a car for you at noon. We have some things to discuss." As I hung up, I felt my heart beating faster, a thrilling sense of anticipation spreading inside me. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I sensed it would change me. And though fear still lingered within, it was no longer the main thing. At noon, as Liam had promised, a black car with tinted windows arrived to pick me up. I got inside, casting a nervous glance around the luxurious leather interior, and the car began to glide smoothly forward. The driver remained silent, and we drove in silence while I watched the buildings of Los Angeles passing by, wondering where I was being taken. We arrived on Rodeo Drive, one of the most expensive streets in the city, where each boutique seemed like a work of art. Liam was waiting for me in front of one of them, standing with his usual perfect posture and a slight smile on his face. He looked relaxed and calm, as if everything was going exactly according to plan. I felt a bit uneasy at his cool confidence, but suppressing the inner voice, I followed him. The boutique he led me to exuded refined luxury. Light walls, golden accents, mannequins dressed in outfits that cost more than my annual rent. Liam smiled at the sales consultant, and she immediately hurried over to us. It seemed this wasn't his first time here. Every salesperson recognized him and addressed him with a particular respect, as if he were more than a client, perhaps a patron. "Today we'll pick out a few things to help you feel on par," he said to me, his tone carrying almost a businesslike approval, as if he were signing a contract. I nodded silently, not fully understanding what he meant, but obediently followed him to the fitting area. The consultants began bringing over outfits, each embodying elegance and style. They offered me a dress that cost more than I could have dared to imagine affording. When I stepped out of the fitting room, Liam looked me over from head to toe, his gaze sharp and appraising. "It suits you," he said with a slight smile. "This is exactly what we need." The phrase, "what we need," struck me again, yet I couldn't help but feel satisfaction as I looked at my reflection. In the new dress, with light makeup and styled hair, I looked like a completely different person. Not the girl who had come here with big dreams, but no idea where to begin. Now, I looked as if I truly belonged to this world. As I tried on silk dresses, tailored suits, and sky-high heels, Liam occasionally came over, offering advice, pointing out details. It seemed his vision of the ideal companion wasn't just a fantasy, but a meticulously planned project. He made no secret of his expectations, approving each new look, adding to my confidence. By the end of the shopping trip, I felt as if I'd gone through some kind of initiation. I was no longer the hesitant girl. In the mirror, a woman looked back at me, confident, stylish, and ready for high society events. Liam came over, took my hand, and looking into my eyes said, "This is only the beginning. Are you ready?" I nodded, feeling something new ignite within me, a curiosity about the world he was leading me into, and the life he could offer. An inner voice still whispered that this was all a game, that it was too beautiful to be real. But I was already in it, ready to experience everything this dazzling new world could offer. Our first outing together took place just a few days after the shopping trip. Liam invited me to a social dinner at the mansion of a famous director, someone whose name I had only heard in the news or seen in the credits of the most expensive films. Liam didn't go into much detail about the evening. He simply said that there would be important people there and that I should act confidently and at ease. As we approached the mansion, a wave of nerves hit me. The house loomed over the hills, glowing with lights against the dark sky. Music and laughter drifted from within, while guests dressed in expensive attire strolled inside, chatting with smiles on their faces. Liam gave my hand a light squeeze as if to reassure me, and I took a deep breath, deciding to let the evening unfold as it would. We entered the hall, and the atmosphere enveloped me like a warm ocean breeze. All around, I saw faces I had only seen on screens. Actors, models, well-known producers, each one a picture of glamour and success. Liam introduced me to a few acquaintances, his business partners, and a famous director whose films I knew almost by heart. I tried to stay composed, but inside I was trembling with excitement. I stood with a glass of champagne, listening as Liam discussed business and upcoming projects, while next to me, an actress whose latest film had grossed millions was chatting. She spoke about her new project, her voice light and relaxed, as if success and recognition were natural parts of her life. I was captivated but knew I had to remain calm, just as Liam had taught me. During the conversation, I noticed Liam occasionally casting an assessing glance in my direction, as if checking how well I fit into his circle. There was something odd in his gaze, something calculating that I couldn't fully grasp. It was clear that I wasn't just his companion. I was part of his image, a reflection of his status. I felt as though I were simultaneously on stage and under a microscope. As the evening went on, I started to relax and even allowed myself to enjoy the moment. I laughed, talked about movies and music, sipped champagne, as if I had belonged to this world all along. I seemed to be doing well. Liam, noticing my confidence, nodded approvingly, like a teacher watching a student's success. But there was one thing that continued to trouble me. In this entire evening, in every word and glance, there was a sense of performance. It was all incredibly beautiful, but left a faint aftertaste of artificiality, as if everyone here were an actor playing a role. And despite my polished exterior, I felt like an outsider, accidentally caught up in this fragile and ruthless world, where everything was dictated by appearances, status, and cold calculation. As we were leaving, Liam took my hand again, and this time his touch felt slightly firmer than usual. "You were magnificent," he said, without looking me in the eye, and once again his words sounded like he was evaluating a job well done. I stood next to him, gazing at the mansion's glittering lights, feeling both happy and lost. Inside, I felt the growing realization that I was diving deeper into someone else's life, a world where not a single detail was left to chance. A week after the dinner, Liam invited me to spend the weekend on his yacht, docked in Malibu. He mentioned it casually, without going into much detail, as if it were the most natural thing, and offered to pick me up in the morning. I prepared in advance, knowing this time it wouldn't just be a social dinner, but an entire weekend surrounded by his friends, the very people who formed the core of his circle and image. When we arrived in Malibu, a huge yacht gleaming in the sunlight appeared before me. The crew welcomed us at the gangway, and as I stepped onto the deck, I felt that familiar flutter of excitement that had become my companion in this new world. Designer cocktails, quiet, relaxing music, a gentle breeze. Everything was thought out to the last detail, making it feel as though life itself was happening in places like this. Liam introduced me to his friends, which included young millionaires, successful entrepreneurs, and their companions, just as elegant and confident as he was. Here, everyone talked only about money, art, and travel, as though these were the essential topics of their lives. I was struck by how easily and casually they discussed their latest investments or expensive purchases, as if it were as commonplace as breakfast or a commute to the office. At one point, we were alone on the deck, and Liam leaned in close, his shoulder brushing against mine. "You have to understand that everyone here plays a role," he said quietly, looking out toward the horizon. "These people evaluate each other based on how well they hold their own, how seamlessly they fit into this society. There's no room for weaknesses here." His words sounded like a lesson, a reminder of the rules of the game in which I now participated. I nodded, realizing that I stood at the edge of something larger than a simple relationship. I was part of his life, part of the role he had been crafting for years, and now it was expected of me to be flawless. As the sun began to set, I went down to the cabin to change. I chose a light dress that Liam had given me the previous week and returned to the deck feeling confident. We sat at a large table, enjoying seafood and sparkling wine. Liam stayed close by, his hand occasionally brushing mine, as if to emphasize that I belonged to him. Later, his friends and their partners joined us, and the evening gradually turned into a lively discussion of the latest news and projects. One of the women, flawless down to the last detail, addressed me, casually asking what I did. I felt a slight embarrassment, but Liam answered for me, saying that I was his inspiration and support. Although his answer sounded beautiful, it left me with a faint feeling of emptiness. I looked around at the smiling faces, watched everyone laughing and pretending to live carefree, fulfilled lives, yet a suspicion grew within me that their lives were also just scenes in an endless performance. The next morning, when we returned from the yacht, I felt a strange emptiness. Liam didn't say much, but as he dropped me off at home, he gently squeezed my hand and told me that I'd done excellently. These words, though they seemed like praise, left me with the feeling that once again, I was just a part of his perfect world, forced to play my role in a life where authenticity was becoming scarcer by the day. A few days later, Liam called to inform me that he had arranged a photo shoot for us with a well-known Los Angeles photographer. His voice was calm, almost businesslike, as if it were just another detail in his meticulously crafted life. I tried to learn more, but he simply said he wanted everything to look natural. This was one of those moments where it felt as if he was making decisions for me, emphasizing that my role was to follow his lead. When I arrived at his mansion, I was met by a team of stylists and makeup artists who immediately set to work on my appearance. Liam had chosen a couture dress for me that wrapped around my shoulders and flowed to the floor in soft waves. In the mirror, I saw a woman from a glossy magazine, elegant, confident, flawless. Once again, I felt that strange sensation of being sculpted to someone else's taste, transformed into the perfect accessory for a photograph. When the photographer arrived, he introduced himself with a slight nod and began explaining how everything should look. He asked us to pose in various ways, sometimes holding hands, sometimes standing close, as if we were a couple who had just found each other amidst the chaos of life. Liam directed the entire process with an almost invisible yet palpable authority, a faint smile on his lips, absolute certainty in every move. At one point, he took my hand and leaned in close, whispering in my ear, "Remember, this photo isn't just an image, it's a reflection of us. We need the world to see how we complement each other." His words felt like a directive, and I did my best to follow his instructions, to hold the pose, to look into his eyes in a way that would convey intimacy and harmony in the frame. The photographer gently guided us on the best gestures, how to look at each other, and I felt the tension between us grow. A strange feeling when you play a role so convincingly that you begin to believe it. The photos turned out stunning. We looked like a fairy tale couple. Beautiful, harmonious, perfectly balanced. Liam was pleased. After the photographer left, he looked at me again with that faint, familiar smile and said, "You did wonderfully. Everyone thinks it's easy to be perfect, but you've exceeded my expectations." There wasn't a hint of tenderness in his voice, but I felt a cold satisfaction, as if he were just checking an item off his to-do list. At that moment, I realized this photo shoot hadn't been for us, not for keepsake memories. It was a tool for his image, another brushstroke highlighting his status. When I returned home, I felt a mix of emotions. The photos were flawless, but they didn't show the real me. It was all like a beautiful package, shiny and enticing, yet empty. Liam had achieved his goal, crafted the image he needed, but what was left for me? A couple of weeks later, Liam called with news that we'd been invited to an exclusive concert featuring star musicians, followed by an after-party that only the elite could attend. I felt a thrill of excitement. This was something more than just a dinner or photo shoot. It was a dive into the very essence of that glamorous life I had only dreamed about before. When I arrived at Liam's mansion, I wore the dress he had selected, a black, form-fitting gown with a deep cut down the back, accentuated with minimalist jewelry. He met me at the entrance, casting a sharp glance at me that no longer surprised me. He assessed my appearance as if checking to see if I was worthy to be by his side at this event. Satisfied that everything met his expectations, he offered me his hand, and we set off. The concert took place in a private venue, filled with people whose faces and names I knew only from articles and magazine covers. When the performance began, I found myself unable to fully focus on the music. I kept looking at the faces around me, amazed at how effortlessly Liam mingled with them, as if this was his natural environment. After the concert, we were invited onto the red carpet. Standing before dozens of cameras and photographers, I felt almost exposed under the barrage of flashes and watchful eyes. Liam held my hand tighter than usual, his gaze fixed forward, like someone who was used to being the center of attention and knew exactly how to present himself. I tried to smile, looking directly into the lenses, feeling a mix of excitement and tension within me. Inside the club, the party was in full swing. Music, laughter, and a slight haze from fragrant cigars filled the air with an atmosphere of luxury and freedom. Yet everything seemed to be following a certain unspoken code. Liam introduced me to a musician who had recently released a hit album and an actress from a blockbuster film. They spoke with such ease, as if our meeting was just another casual evening. Liam watched me, observing how naturally I could blend into this world. When we stopped at the bar to order champagne, I caught his gaze for a moment. It was cold and intent, as if he were analyzing not me, but how well I was meeting his expectations. It was the gaze of a director looking at his lead actress, nothing more. And in that gaze, despite its coldness, there was something truly scorching. He didn't see a person in me, didn't see a woman. He saw an idealized image he had created and was now pleased with. But amidst this crowd, I felt strangely alone. I suddenly realized that behind all this glamour lay an emptiness, that all the noise and lights were mere illusion. These thoughts almost unsettled me when one of the photographers asked us to pose again. Liam smiled, took my hand, and murmured through gritted teeth, "Just smile, as if this is the best thing that's ever happened to you." I followed his advice, but something inside me had shifted. I realized that in this glossy picture, in this magnificence, in these flashes and smiles, there was no room for my true self. When Liam suggested a weekend in Miami, I was caught off guard. It was unexpected, as if he were trying to add a touch of lightness and spontaneity to our relationship. He called me in the morning and simply said, "Pack your things, we're leaving in a couple of hours. You need to relax." There was something in his voice that made me doubt. Did he truly want me to unwind? Or was this just another way of immersing me in his perfect world? Liam had rented a luxurious villa on the ocean front with an endless view of the waves. The villa was flawless, just like everything surrounding Liam. A marble pool, glass walls framing the sunset, distant sounds of music drifting from the beachfront cafes. Inside, a sense of anticipation kindled within me, mixed with a slight unease. What would happen this time? The days passed in a haze of luxury. We lounged lazily on the beach, enjoying the sound of the ocean, and in the evenings we hosted dinners attended by Liam's friends, young entrepreneurs, stars, and models. They talked about business, recent travels, art, discussing who had bought a new mansion or invested in the latest startup. They were outwardly friendly and lively, Yet beneath the laughter, there was something superficial and elusive, as if no one was entirely sincere. They were like mirrors, reflecting and mimicking one another. One evening, in one of the most expensive restaurants, as we sat enjoying the ocean view, I noticed a famous model at a nearby table. She wasn't just beautiful. Her face and name were universally known. At one point, she smiled at us casually, then walked over and invited us to join her. Liam eagerly accepted, and I felt as though I had been drawn into a meticulously staged scene, where every step and every word was planned. She laughed frequently, flirted, as if basking in Liam's attention, but at one moment her eyes darted to me, assessing. That night in Miami was particularly memorable. In the restaurant, amidst the white tablecloths and champagne glasses, surrounded by light and glamour, I suddenly noticed Liam behaving differently. When he spoke with the model, his gaze was more engaged, and his compliments sounded livelier than usual. In that moment, I felt like a mere backdrop to him. His hand, so often resting on mine, was now free, and there was something both cold and indifferent in his smile. Later, when we returned to the villa, Liam resumed his usual self, reserved and composed as always. But that night, lying beneath the starry sky on the terrace, I felt for the first time a subtle, invisible barrier standing between us. I realized that to Liam, I wasn't a partner or a girlfriend. I was merely an element that completed his image. For him, my emotions and feelings were just part of the role I played. His care and attention were genuine only as long as I fit into his scene, his perfect world. I began to wonder, could I keep up with this performance any longer? The morning after that honest conversation was foggy and cool, as if the sky itself was in sympathy with the unspoken closeness we had shared. I felt strange, as though our conversation under the stars had filled us both with something new and deeper. Yet it was clear that Liam had diligently returned to his familiar role, one he knew and controlled. For breakfast, Liam invited a few business partners. He barely warned me, giving only a polite reminder that I should be ready and look the part. I felt a slight unease returning to the role I was expected to play. But now, after the previous evening, that role weighed on me even more. I wanted to be real, the person he had spoken with last night. But it seemed Liam had put that moment out of his mind, slipping back into his usual distant persona. Liam's partners arrived on time, and breakfast quickly transformed into a mini-meeting. The guests sat around the table, their conversation lively yet filled with business-like seriousness. Liam was as poised as ever, guiding the conversation with the ease and wit that always seemed to disarm people. He introduced me, as usual, as his companion, and though I smiled and politely engaged in the conversation, something inside me felt torn. I felt as though I was in place, but not where I wanted to be. When the conversation drifted toward new investment projects, Liam leaned in confidentially, lightly touching my hand, and whispered for me to be cheerful and unobtrusive. This comment felt like a severing of the thread that had connected us last night. He expected me to play my role, and I once again became part of his image, just another detail that made his life impeccable and alluring to others. I tried to engage in the conversation, joking and smiling, but a slight bitterness was growing inside me. I was no longer sure if I wanted to stay by Liam's side, because even the most genuine moments with him felt temporary, as if he could easily discard them if they didn't fit his perfect script. As breakfast drew to a close, one of the businessmen commented with a slight smirk that Liam was lucky to have such a magnificent companion, to which Liam responded with a brief smile and a slightly mocking glance in my direction. It was praise, but there was a kind of detachment in his words. I was magnificent for him, but only within a predefined role. In this world, I was not a person, but an asset, one he used to create an impression, like an artfully chosen accessory that he proudly displayed in public, but could easily set aside. On the way home, I suddenly felt a heaviness in my chest. After he had shown me his vulnerability last night, this morning's gathering had reminded me once again how adept he was at building walls around himself, turning me into an instrument rather than a partner. An understanding began to take shape within me. In this world, his world, I was finding it harder each day to hold on to myself. A few days after the breakfast with his business partners, Liam surprised me. He called in the morning and, with little explanation, asked me to come to an upscale jewelry salon on Rodeo Drive. His voice was calm, his tone leaving no room for objections. For a moment, I felt a wave of irritation. After all our recent moments of closeness and distance, I was tired of merely being part of his scenes, of being someone whose actions he controlled. I arrived at the designated place where a consultant immediately greeted me and led me into a private room. Under the soft lighting, on a velvet display, sparkled a diamond necklace. Exquisite, finely crafted, as dazzling and cold as everything that surrounded Liam. I stood there, staring at this splendor, when he entered, calm and confident as always, a faint smile on his lips. "This is for you," he said, looking at me intently, as if studying my reaction. "You should shine beside me, Laura. You know how important reputation is, especially when you're in the spotlight." Those words should have touched me, but instead, I felt an odd emptiness. It was all as it always was. He surrounded me with luxury, cared about my appearance by his side, but every gesture was confined within the boundaries of his familiar role, his meticulously crafted image. The gift, which should have been a sign of affection, felt like something else entirely, a symbol of my status in his life, as though I were just another investment, a piece of his perfect world. Liam stepped closer and fastened the necklace around my neck with a light touch. There was gallantry in his movements, but no tenderness. This was a ritual, not an act of love. I looked into the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at me, a radiant, refined, ideal companion for a millionaire, someone Liam could be proud of. And yet, looking at my reflection, I realized that with every new detail of this image, I was losing myself. Liam caught my gaze in the mirror and gave a slight smile, as if he saw in my face and the jewelry the final confirmation of his vision. But at that moment, I had a clear feeling that I was no longer myself, but merely an idea, a convenient and beautiful figure he managed just like one of his business projects. Later, as we left the jewelry salon, Liam placed his hand on my shoulder and once again said that I fit perfectly into his life. But now those words resonated differently, as if they meant that my place wasn't in his heart, but in his carefully arranged universe, where everything was organized like a ledger. And I realized, no matter how much I wanted to believe in his care, behind all this glitter lay a cold, calculated intention. That night, lying alone in the quiet of my apartment, I looked at the necklace glimmering in the dim light and understood that it wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol that I was no longer myself. Several weeks passed after that evening in the jewelry salon. We continued attending social events, spending evenings surrounded by stars and businessmen, and each time I saw my reflection beside him, a growing sense of estrangement filled me. I already knew I was playing a role, and perhaps I had even learned to be the perfect companion. But it wasn't me. I was a stranger in my own life. One evening, after we returned home from yet another event, Liam suddenly approached me, his face cold and focused, with no hint of warmth. He looked at me as if weighing something important, something that needed to be said. "Laura," he said, his tone unmistakably businesslike, "I think it's time we end our relationship." The words were calm, almost emotionless, as if he were announcing a decision to change marketing strategies rather than ending a relationship. I stood silent, feeling an icy wave sweep over me. He continued, "You've been perfect, Laura. You fit into my life beautifully, and I'm grateful for that. But now I need something new, something that better aligns with my current goals." He spoke, as always, steadily, calmly, looking directly into my eyes without attempting to soften his words. It felt like this moment had been long planned as part of his ideal script, where I was merely a temporary role. I stood there, unable to move, trying to grasp that all this time I had only been an accessory to his image. I realized that my feelings, my emotions, my attachment had meant nothing to him. I was just a passing element, a decorative part of his life, not someone he genuinely valued. Holding back tears, I calmly turned and walked away. Outside, the night was cool, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. Free from his plans, his expectations, my role. And although it was a bittersweet freedom, I knew it was exactly what I had been seeking for so long. That night, I understood that I needed to return to myself. All this time with Liam, I had learned to be the person he wanted me to be, but I had lost sight of who I truly was. I realized that I was ready to start over, not as his ideal girlfriend, but as myself. Liam's world was behind me, his luxurious parties, his mirror like friends, his endless statuses. Now, I had only the road ahead, a life that, though it may not be perfect, would finally be authentically mine.